Hello, my name is Esther Wojcicki. I am here at Stanford University in California, and I am very honored to be a speaker for you at your conference. I'm sorry I cannot be there in person, but there's been some family issues that have prevented me from traveling. But I want to thank your conference organizers for making this possible via the web. So we all have to be grateful for the internet connections that we have today. So I would like to share my screen with you, and I will try to get my presentation. And here we go. So my goal is to prepare youth for the 21st century. And I'm talking about that worldwide. I think it's a problem that exists in a lot of countries. It's not just in one country, it's not just in the US, it's not just in Korea, it's actually worldwide. So education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, said Nelson Mandela, the famous South African. But it's true not only for South Africa, not only for the US, it's true for the world. Education is the most powerful weapon which we can use to change the world and to make the world a better place. So this is a little bit about me. I'm an American journalist, I'm an educator, and I'm vice chair of the Creative Commons Advisory Council. I was chair of Creative Commons for a few years, and now I have moved to the Creative Commons Advisory Council. If you don't know about Creative Commons, I advise you to take a look. It's a very important organization. It's creativecommons.org, and it's the infrastructure, the legal infrastructure behind the open web. So here's a little bit more about me. I'm the 2002 California Teacher of the Year. I was very honored. I'm founder of the Palo Alto High School Media Arts Program. In 1985, probably before most of you were even born, I first used computers in the classroom. I thought computers were great from the moment I laid my eyes on them. I'm also the co-founder of the Journalistic Learning Initiative at the University of Oregon, and it's in most of the schools in Oregon and in 4 additional states. And in the Journalistic Learning Initiative, we help teachers learn how to give lessons about journalism using project-based learning with journalistic outcomes. I'm the co-founder of Track.app. I founded it in 2021 together with my former student. And I invite all of you to go to Track.app and sign up. It's free, and the target group is kids in grades 3 to 8, and all the content is created by kids in grades 9 and above. And it's an absolutely popular, great product that is based on the teachings in my class. So I just advise you to go and try it out. I'm entitled the Godmother of Silicon Valley, and that's probably because I've had so many students in Silicon Valley, and I've had many, many students that have done extremely well. So that's where I got this title of Godmother of Silicon Valley. I can't actually remember who decided on this. So I thought I'd give you something else, a little bit about my background, so that you'll know more about me. And this is a very famous garage, and I'm not sure you ever saw it, but now you are. And it was in this garage that Google was born. And this garage belonged to my daughter, Susan Wojcicki, and she had just bought the house, and then she didn't know how to pay the mortgage. It seemed like it was going to be easy for her, but then as time went on, she's like, oh my God, how am I going to pay this mortgage? So she rented her garage to Larry and Sergey, and that is how Google started. They were here for the first year, and then they moved to another location in downtown Palo Alto, and then they moved to Mountain View where they are today. And I have more stories about Google and in the garage. And at some point I could do another presentation for you about what it was like at the beginning of Google. So here's more details about me. I wrote this book, How to Raise Successful People, Simple Lessons for Radical Results. It came out in May of 2019 and then was published again in paperback in 2020. It's in the Kindle version, audio version, hardcover, and paperback. And what I'm trying to do is lead a revolution. I want to change the way we are parenting and change the way we are teaching, because for the 21st century, we need new skills. And so Arianna Huffington said, How to Raise Successful People shows us how to be our best, so our children can be their best. And that is my goal. Let's see what we can do to help children be their best. It's got stories about my children, which you'll hear about shortly, my students, and my life. And all the stories have a point. They're not just stories that are entertaining. They have a point. The stories are very entertaining, but they're supported by research, which we looked up afterward to show you how it makes a difference. So if you check the notes on all the pages, at the bottom of the pages, there's a lot of notes. You'll see the resources in case you want to use those. So this is the way that the book is organized, and this is the basic message in the book, supported by lots of stories. So what I say that we need to have in the world, in education, in parenting, in the corporate world, is more TRIC. TRIC stands for trust, respect, independence, collaboration, and kindness. My theory is if we change parenting, we change education, we're going to change the world and make it into a better place. And I'll talk a little bit more about this during the talk, but basically we need to trust our students and our children, because when you trust them, they then trust themselves. If they are afraid to try new things, but then if somebody who's in a responsible position trusts them, they say, oh, well, maybe I can do it. So, and respect them. They need to respect their ideas. That means listening. It doesn't mean doing it. It means listening. And a lot of people don't listen to kids' ideas. Independence, give them as much independence as possible. Collaborate instead of dictating, and treat them with kindness. So the book is out in Korean as well. So I suggest you take a look and see if you can find it. It's the same book, but in Korean. So I'm now going to tell you the story of George Danzig, who you probably never heard of. So George Danzig was a very important person. He was a very important person in the world that we live in today. And let me just tell you a little bit about him. This is George. And after getting late to class one day, George copied from the blackboard 2 problems, thinking they were homework. And he worked all night. I met George and I talked to him about this. He said he worked really hard all night. And the reason he did that is he thought he was going to get a really bad grade in the class. And so he wanted to solve the problems. So he solved them. It's kind of remarkable. And he came to class the next morning. He said he was exhausted because he had not slept all night. And this is what happened. They were actually not homework. They were actually 2 famous unsolved statistics problems that had never been solved in the past century, which earned him his PhD immediately. Nobody could believe that he had solved those problems. And George went on to be the father of linear programming. And if you look him up, you'll see all the great things that he did. We would not be blessed to have the computers that we have today or the internet that we have today would not have been for George Danzig. This is what George said, and this is what's important, and governs a lot of my philosophy. If I had known that the problems were not homework, but were in fact two famous unsolved problems in statistics, I probably would not have thought positively, would have become discouraged, and would never have solved them. So the question I ask everybody is, are we doing the same thing with a lot of the memorization and a lot of the problems that we say, oh, they've already tried it and they can't solve it? So perhaps we should rethink a lot of the things that we take for granted. So memorization, which is what the whole system worldwide is based on, it often comes without understanding. People memorize, but then they don't really understand what they memorize. They can just answer the question on the test, but not really understand it. Memorization works against creativity. Because with memorization, you're trying to get the right answer, and you're looking on the test for the right answer, and it's usually a multiple choice test. And but with creativity, you actually have to have an original answer. And memorization works against it because when you're memorizing, you're looking for the right answer. So this philosophy of mine, trick, is missing from most schools worldwide. School is not a place where people feel trusted and respected. There's absolutely almost no independence. You are told exactly what to do, very little collaboration, and most people don't think of school as a kind place. So what we need to do is change the culture of school and see whether or not we can instill some of the trick principles, and you'll see why it's so important. So even the most discouraged student becomes motivated when they have some trick in their classroom. We have a lot of discouraged, depressed students today. In fact, in the United States, 50% of the students are depressed. And so they're depressed because they think they can never do it right. And they're not given an opportunity to revise. So I suggest we rethink the pedagogy that we're using to teach. So when you use trick, you learn the 4 C's, and these are the most important skills for the 21st century. You learn these 4 C's not by listening, but by actually doing, by experiencing it. Creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. You cannot learn to be creative by watching someone else do it, just like you can't learn to swim by watching someone else swim. And you can't learn to ride a bike unless you actually ride the bike. If you read a book about riding a bike, you're not going to learn how. Collaboration, you also have to learn what it's like to collaborate, learn what it's like to communicate and to think critically. So those are skills that we need to learn in school by doing. So unfortunately, you have the Hagwons in Korea, and the Hagwons don't focus on learning by doing. They focus on memorization. So the question is, should that change? Should the Hagwons be so prolific everywhere? Should all the students be involved, or so many students be involved? Or can the Hagwons themselves change and focus more on project-based learning? In any event, whatever is decided, Hagwons need to stop focusing just on memorization. And this is a picture from a school in Korea. And this student, of course, doesn't feel very happy about school. I assume there's no trick in his school because he says we are school slaves. We are told what to do all the time. We are not given any opportunity to think independently, no opportunity to be creative, no opportunity for kindness or collaboration. So we need to rethink the culture of the school system. So if you don't memorize, you don't pass the test and you fail. And that is what everybody's afraid of. They're terrified of failing. They need to reduce the memorization and enhance creativity. And here's a very famous person who is the #1 TED speaker in the world. He unfortunately passed away about 2 years ago. Sir Ken Robinson from the United Kingdom. And he says, we are educating people out of their creative capacities. I believe this passionately. People don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it, or rather, we get educated out of it. So if you look at statistics, you will see the most creative students are in kindergarten because they haven't yet been exposed to the school system. By the time they are 12th graders, only 5% of the students are creative. Whereas in kindergarten, 95% of them were creative. We are educating students out of their creativity. So the chief enemy of creativity is good sense, said by Pablo Picasso, the famous artist. As long as you are worried about making sense and people say to you, oh no, don't do that, that just makes no sense, then you're not going to be creative. We have to give students an opportunity to be creative and to get credit just for trying, because who knows what kind of a great idea is going to come out of that creativity. So Albert Einstein, this was even before the internet. Albert Einstein said, never memorize something that you can look up. But I'm telling you, we're training kids to be like little computers so they can regurgitate that information quickly. That is not necessary. So the most creative minds in the 21st century did poorly in school. And I'm going to give you some examples of who they are. Elon Musk. I think he did flunk out of high school. He managed to get into college just barely, and he did not do well in college. And one of the reasons is he refused to memorize. He refused to regurgitate. He refused to say exactly what they wanted on the test. He was thinking independently. Bill Gates also dropped out of Harvard. He's like, I don't want to do any more of this memorization. Mark Zuckerberg also dropped out of Harvard. Steve Jobs, one of the most creative people in the century, dropped out of Reed College. And you need to listen to his graduation speech. He gave a graduation speech at Stanford. It's online. It's a great speech. And he talks about what he did and the story of his life and how he tried really hard to be a creative person. So changing schools is hard. I'm asking you to think about, how can you change the culture of school? It's really hard to change the culture of school. I realize it. Schools were created to perpetuate tradition and learnings. So they don't want to change. But in fact, they can change. And I mentioned about Tract earlier, the company that I started with my former student. And Tract is TRACT.app. It's an online program. And the goal of that program is to give teachers an opportunity to bring creativity into the classroom. You can do it for 10% of the time, 20% of the time. We're not going to change the whole system right away, ever. It's not going to happen. But we can change a little bit of the system. And you have the trajectory in Korea. That is an example of giving kids an opportunity to think independently. And perhaps you need more of that. Tract is one of them. The trajectory is another. So here's a country that actually managed to just recently change school. They just did it within the last few months. They will no longer compare students' performance to each other. From now on, the student's performance will be compared to that student. How did you do last week? How did you do the week before? How did you do last year? What can we do to help you improve? But we're not going to compare one student to another. So we'll see how that works out. But Singapore is one of the best school districts in the world. and this is what they've decided to do. So since the Korean education is based on tradition and the focus is on the past and memorization and getting the right answer, and Hagwons create even more pressure, perhaps the people who are at the conference can talk about small ways to improve creativity, things that can be done to help students in Korea not be afraid to make a mistake. I think that's one of the most important things, to believe in yourself. So our students face a world that is complex and in flux. This is the world, it's a totally different world than your parents and your grandparents lived in. And we need to equip students to navigate the ambiguity that is the most important thing. That is the most important thing we're doing. We need to teach them how to navigate ambiguity. Because the world, there are no perfect answers. So here's just a few of the problems the planet faces. Just a few, but they're big. The timeline of global risks. This is from the World Economic Forum. Number one, extreme weather. Are we thinking about how to solve these problems? Livelihood crisis. How are we earning money these days? Climate action failure. That's a real problem because a lot of the climate action we're taking doesn't work. Social cohesion erosion happening all over the world. Infectious diseases. We just experienced COVID and it's not over yet. Mental health deterioration. So many kids are depressed and upset. So many people are depressed. I mean, as I mentioned, in the US, we have 50% of the students are depressed. Cybersecurity failure. So many breaches of cybersecurity. Are we teaching? Are there people coming to help us solve these problems? The debt crisis. Digital inequality. What are we doing to make sure that people at the low end of the social economic spectrum are also included in the digital world? They need to have phones. They need to have access to computers. They need to have access to the web. And actually, we're really worried now about the asset bubble burst. So as you see, the stock market around the world is not doing well. So we have a lot of issues. And what we need to do is make sure that we give kids an opportunity to think creatively, think outside the box, not say to themselves, oh, this problem, it can't be solved. Think about George Danzig, who solved that problem, especially because he didn't know that it couldn't be solved. So here are the huge data breaches from 2004 to 2021, 17.2 billion number of records lost. Crazy. And here are the cyber attacks. Cyber attacks are happening every day. The US has the greatest number of cyber attacks, 156. Says 2018 was the worst year for cyber attacks in America. But they're still happening, and we need to prevent them. So fake news is also a real problem, not just in Korea, not just in the United States, not just in Europe, it's worldwide. And this is the first, I think this is number one fake news that traveled all over the world, and some people still think it's real. Pope Francis shocks world, endorses Donald Trump for president. 960,000 people saw that, and then they shared it with even more people. So fake news is a real problem, and we need to educate students about it, and we need to have people working on how can we solve this problem. If you take a look at all these different news breaches, WikiLeaks confirms Hillary sold weapons to ISIS. These are all fake news that had an unfortunately negative impact on the United States elections. That is a real problem. So again, this is another important statistic. 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030, that is just 8 years away, by the way, haven't been invented yet. So we need people that are going to be able to think creatively, assume new job skills, and work at those new jobs. We need people that think creatively and independently. So here's one of the crises that already started. It's remote work. And so many people are working remotely and they don't want to go back to the office. That's not just in America, it's worldwide. So how do we change that? How do we work with that? And AI is impacting our lives. It's, everywhere. You call on the phone and the AI answers the phone. And, on social media platforms and e-commerce and autonomous vehicles and the smart home, a lot of people can click and see what's going on at their home on their phone. The banking sector, navigation, and security and surveillance. All these are AI. So how are we training students to deal with this? So we cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So again, this is an important quote from Albert Einstein. So if you memorize and you think that's the way to solve a problem, you perhaps aren't being as creative as you could be if, in fact, it was okay to take a risk. So your mindset is everything. If you think you have a growth mindset, you're going to be able to grow. If you think you have a fixed mindset and that your abilities are limited already, you're not going to grow. So your mindset is everything. People who want to stick to what they know create more problems than people that are willing to say they're inspired by success. Here's another slide on the fixed mindset versus the growth mindset. So a fixed mindset says, I give up easily. Failure is the limit of my abilities. I avoid challenges. I stick to what I know. I'm either good at it or I'm not. So the growth mindset is just the opposite, and it's very important. The book on mindset was written by Carol Dweck, who is a professor at Stanford. So the chief enemies of innovation in any field are tradition and the fear of looking stupid. Those are the number one inhibiting factors, and you should think about that. Don't be afraid of looking stupid, because a lot of people that have succeeded in doing amazing things, they did not worry about that. So what you think about yourself matters a lot. If you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're right. Whatever you think, you're right. So one of the things I did for my daughters is help them believe in themselves. Here is a book that is also a famous book by Angela Duckworth. It's called Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance. I recommend it. So how do you get kids to work so that they really care about it? Is the only way through a grade and memorization, or can people have passion and be persevering in other ways? And here is what I think: from trick to grit. So trick is, of course, my philosophy that I talked about earlier. When students are treated with trick, then they have grit. Then they want to continue to work on something that they care about and that is important to them. I just remember years ago with Steve Jobs, who was a friend of mine. I remember how passionate he was about making sure that a portable phone, was going to be in everyone's pocket. And when he was talking about this in the 1990s, nobody believed him, because we all sat at home to wait for that phone call. Having it in your pocket was like impossible, at least people thought. So my main goal is to help you believe in yourself, is to help empower students to believe in themselves by giving them experiential opportunities to develop trust in themselves. Experiential means you can do it in class, you can work with your friends, it can be out of class, but an opportunity to do what it is that you want to do, as opposed to constantly being told by the system. So my pedagogy started with the birth of my daughters. My main goal for them when they were born was to be independent thinkers. And my pedagogy started with these three girls. This is what they looked like when they were young. Susan, Janet, and Anne. This is when we lived in Geneva, Switzerland. And this is what they look like today. Susan, Janet, and Anne. And so I'll tell you a little bit about what they do. Here is Susan. She's the CEO of YouTube. This is Janet. She's a professor of pediatrics at the University of California, San Francisco. And this is Anne. She's the founder of 23andMe, the largest personal genetics company in the world. So what I think I gave my daughters is the ability to believe in their dreams and believe that they could accomplish whatever they wanted to do. And that is the same thing I'm trying to do for my students. And that's the same thing I'm trying to help you do for students in Korea. My pedagogy continued with the birth of my media arts program. So I didn't only do this for my children, I did this in my media arts program where I taught for 40 years. So I started in 1984 with 20 students using a typewriter. And today the program has grown. So it's the largest scholastic media program in the United States. I have 10 publications, 700 plus students, and 6 media arts teachers. It's the largest program of its kind because kids coming out of that program don't just understand media. They understand that they can believe in themselves, that they can achieve their dreams. And that is also how I got the title Godmother of Silicon Valley. Today, I no longer have a small room. I have this building that was built by the city of Palo Alto. It's the Media Arts Center. And in that building are those 700 kids. This is one of the publications that the students produce. It comes out every 2 to 3 weeks, 28 pages long. There are also 10 other publications, newspapers, in addition, magazines, television, radio, podcasts, and video design. The students all run a summer program called Camp Mac. The students that in the program are 9th graders or 10th graders, and the students running the program are 11th and 12th graders. So what I'm doing is providing leadership training for teens who run the program, and then an introduction to journalism for kids who are taking the program. It's very successful. Everyone loves it. The kids love it. The leaders love it. So I highly recommend it. So some of the graduates from the program include, this is a very famous graduate, James Franco, an actor, and he is in The Interview, Spider-Man, Pineapple Express, Rise of Planet Apes, I think, Rise of the Planet Apes. I'm sorry, I think that this is not the correct title. Eat, Pray, Love, and 127 Hours. So James said something that I think is really important for all teachers to realize and all people working with kids to know. She showed me I could take my dreams as seriously as I wanted. So I believed in him. I thought, these are his dreams. This is what he wants to do. He wants to be an actor. Let's see what I can do to support him. And it worked out, as you can see. He's a very famous actor. Here's another student whose name is Noah Snyder. He's a New York Times reporter in the Ukraine. He actually just switched recently. He's now the bureau chief for the New York Times in Japan. Gadi Epstein, he is a reporter for China for The Economist magazine. Lisa Brennan Jobs, as I mentioned, Steve Jobs was a parent in my program, and she's an author and a writer. And there's thousands of more over my 40-year career, 40-year period, and this is what they look like. So I'm in the front wearing pink, but all these students, I taught them that whatever it is that they're interested in is what they should pursue. I gave kids the freedom to make mistakes and revise. They learn to be creative and believe in themselves. So risk-taking is core. It's important for creativity. If students focus on memorization, they won't take a risk. They always just want to get the right answer. So this is a very important slide. Hopefully you can remember this one. People learn from mistakes. Realize people make lots of mistakes before they reach their goal. Mistakes are okay as long as they don't hurt anybody, as long as they don't create a lot of problems with the world. We need to make mistakes in order to make progress. So let's just think about this and how it's important and the backbone of creativity. And just remember, trick in education, so important. Trust your students, respect their ideas, give them independence, collaborate with them, don't dictate, and always treat them with kindness. This is from my book. When you read the book, this is one of the opening paragraphs of the book. There are no Nobel Prizes for parenting or education, but there should be. They are the two most important things we do in society. How we raise and educate our children determines not only the people they become, but the society we create. Just think about that. It's really, really important. Teachers, parents, you have the most important job. So thank you for your attention. I wish I could be in Korea with you. And I hope next time, perhaps next year or the following year, I can come. If you'd like to reach me, it's esther@tract.app. And thank you so much for your attention.